Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the I Am 1-2 podcast with your host, Christopher Cohn. With me, as always, in the studio is the man that makes all the magic happen, Dan the Man. Join us and say hello.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your day.
We do hope you're enjoying your day, and that's why we're here. We want to bring better and more to your life, and wouldn't that be great? And especially free of charge, which is what this is. I was talking to my patients today at the mental hospital, and I was explaining to them that I think a lot of the woes, if not all of the world, are people who don't have any tools, and they don't know what's wrong with them, and they don't know themselves. And only 1 out of 10 people get treatment for alcohol and substance abuse and drug use, but I assume it's the same just about for mental health issues. They either don't have insurance, don't have resources, or don't have the ability or the bravery to go. And so getting these tools and the wonder of the internet, the wonder of self-help books, the wonder of podcasts is just unbelievable that we have today. So take full advantage of it because you can have a better life. We know that the brain is not stuck in your patterns, and you're not fated to repeat the patterns that your parents did if you know what those patterns are. But you got to do a lot of work to identify that stuff. All right, today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about one for the ladies. Yes, I've been wanting to do this one. This will be a two-parter, actually. We're going to do one for the ladies this week, and then the next week we're going to have one for the gentlemen. And there are still gentlemen in this world, even those that don't look so pretty at the moment. But what has happened since I've been in therapy practice, and especially also when I was a sponsor, and also since I grew up in a family system that was pretty messed up, is that I've observed. And I'm also a writer, so I've observed, and I was into acting, and I observed. That's one of the things I'm very good about, is watching and observing. And when you're in practice, and I've been in professional practice for over 22 years, I'm a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor with a master's of science in social work. I've noticed themes in my patients that I see getting in the way of their recovery chances. So I wanted to sort of bring them all together and lay them out before you, and you can sort of make a list for yourself as to which ones you think are more important for you to pay attention to. But I would also encourage you not to just dismiss ones you think, well, that's not me. Don't be careful about that, because sometimes the ones that might be most you are the ones you're not ready to hear yet. And always check with your sponsors or your support group, your friends, and say, well, this guy over here is throwing this out, and I don't think it's me. Do I do this? And sometimes your really good friends will be the ones that say, yeah, you kind of do that all the time. And please understand, we're not stereotyping. This is not generalizations. These are themes that, as I've done practice, and I have sort of a rotating door both in and out of my group, and we get people coming and going, and it's almost to a point, it's very hard to remember who's been in group. And how people come up to me all the time, and they'll be like, don't you remember me? And I'm like, sure. And I'm like, no. And I used to have an old therapist that used to joke and say, you had to have done something really bad for us to remember you, because it just is constant. The stream of misery that flows through that institution, as Bill wrote in the big book, nonstop. I always have job security. I'm never worried about that. And it's worse than ever today, right? We can all agree on that. People are really struggling. So I came up with these themes because they kept coming up. And so if you don't get mad at me, I'm the reporter, I'm the messenger. I'm just telling you what my ladies have run into and what they're talking about in group. And also what they're talking about the most, and most often. And also, I had a lot of experience. I've sponsored some women, but more than that, I was raised by women. I know women extremely well. I was raised by 3 strong women: my older sister, my mom, and my grandmother. And my grandmother was the matriarch, old Southern matriarch. She ran the family. And my mom was extremely strong on the front lines of women's liberation. So I've seen a lot of women's issues, and I've also seen their struggles. My mom was married 3 times to an alcoholic and divorced. My sister did it twice. Again, it's not their fault. They're just repeating patterns that were put into them by their genes and by the environment. And without tools, we are doomed to repeat our patterns. So let's go over some of these issues for you all today, and we'd love to hear from you back on the comments, or send us an email. We'll give you that in a minute later. About anything you've run into, we can add to the list, but also if you want to further flesh these out a bit. So the biggest obstacle I run into the most is with men and women is that there's another priority vying for their attention. that's very hard to balance with the priority of keeping recovery first. Because we always say if you don't have recovery first, you're doomed. You've got to keep that first. Same theory. If you've never heard it, it's an oldie but a goodie. You got to put your own oxygen mask on. They tell you that if you're traveling with a child on an airplane, because if you get freaked out and try to put on the mask on the child and you're not doing it right, the child is fighting you, you both die. But in recovery, I've got to get my own oxygen mask securely on. Then I can help others and do what I got to do. But what my women tend to do is they tend to put family ahead of their recovery. And that is a very hard issue for any counselor or therapist to fight against, because how are you going to say, don't take care of your kid? Right? And if they don't have child care and they're a single mother, God forbid, it's an almost impossible task. I say almost because we here in our town, and I'm sure in every town in the world, have strong ladies, and they all step up and support each other, and they will take care of your kids if you need to go to a meeting, or you can bring your kids to some meetings, or some meetings have child care. There's always ways to figure it out. But I do know that trying to surmount that on your own doesn't work. So putting family ahead of recovery is sort of an ingrained thing, in that it also goes along with the second thing I find is that my women, where a lot of them were pushed into a caregiver role when they were young in their family. A lot of times it might have been because of poverty and both parents had to work, so then older sis gets to babysit and suddenly she loses her childhood. I was just talking to one of my patients about that she was forced to become the caregiver because her parent was invalid, and so she was taking care of her parent when the parent should have been taking care of her. And those things are like, well, what are you going to do? Life happens, right? You got just somehow the family has to survive. But to the child's brain, they did not get the fair chance at having a full childhood. They didn't get it to go out and play and not worry and not have to grow up too soon. And that is another common thread I hear from both sexes, growing up too soon. But it plays out for my female clients in this caregiver role, that I had to grow up and be the adult because there's no other adults around. And for my women as well, a big problem today is they're not only the caregiver for their children, but they're also the caregiver for their adult parents as they're aging as well. I know several people right now in my support group, and one sponsee of mine, and her father has Alzheimer's, and he went through a terrible life of drinking, so he's really damaged. And it's I've listened to her struggles a lot, and I can't imagine. It's going to be one of the most frustrating things to deal with dementia and Alzheimer's. I've got a lady in my group right now who's dealing with that. So you still cannot put that ahead of your recovery. And I've watched my patients try to navigate these challenges, and then when they fault on the side of, well, I got to be there for my parent, I got to go to the hospital, I got to go, and they miss group, then they relapse. And then they're drunk or they're high and they still can't be there for their parent. You see the logic? We've got to keep you alive so you can be there to help them, but you also got to set boundaries and have limits. And a lot of my ladies, I don't know if it's so much an issue that they don't feel comfortable setting boundaries, because a lot of women weren't allowed to do that in the past. It seems like you would think that had passed us by, but that's not true. I still see that showing up these days, that they have very difficult speaking up for themselves, speaking their truth, saying when they need something or they don't like something. And again, particularly I'm talking a lot about alcohol and drug patients because those are my patients, but it translates to other groups. But particularly for alcohol and drug patients, boundaries we're not known for. It is not one of our strong suits. Another issue that comes up a lot in group for women, and it's prior to their drinking or drugging, is eating issues. They will literally say that, long before I was an alcoholic, I would struggle with bulimia or with anorexia and things like that. And I believe as a therapist, we're being trained to know that this is going to be more epidemic as we continue because of social media and because of the power of technology. I don't know if you all saw the story this past week. I almost sent it to you, Dan. There is a Harper's Magazine, not Vogue, but I think it was Harper's, one of the two, decided to put an AI model on the cover and see if people freaked out. And they said it's not as easy a process as you would think. They put in their little parameters, and they said it took the place a month to come up with the perfect image that they thought was magazine worthy, right? And it's indistinguishable from a person the way I looked at it. It just looks like another photoshopped, glossed up person, right? That doesn't look real either, but we're used to it. But I'm sitting there going, well, I guess we're all just going to be replaced. But again, everybody was talking about in the article, they just set the bar even higher for women that are already struggling with self-image issues, right? And unfortunately in our society, I'm just the messenger, not the guy creating it. We do put in a lot of unfair pressure on our ladies to be perfect, measure up, be the supermodel body, whatever. I know, I've heard a lot of people talking in trainings about fat shaming we've made progress on and body acceptance of all different types we've made progress on, but it doesn't seem to translate into everyday life. I'm still seeing a lot of people still receiving static for their body size, or even if it's imagined but sort of implied from their family comments. A lot of my ladies grew up with comments from their own mother saying you don't look right or you're too fat. They'll come out and say it. And I'm like, damn. I mean, we guys think we had it hard with our dads, but literally I've heard a lot of stories about women's mothers just being brutal with them. In addition to eating issues, we also run into cutting and self-harm issues. Now, it's not that unusual, actually. And somebody in my group brought this past week, we were talking around it. They said, what about tattooing? Isn't that the same? I said, actually, in a way, it can be a little different in that people choose to have them. It can be different in a way that people choose to have them and they feel good about it and they want to do that. But the whole idea of cutting is escape, and it really is dealing with pain. And it's being numb. And what I've heard from all the patients I've had who really had it bad, they felt so numb to their feelings and they wanted to feel even number because they didn't want to feel their feelings, that cutting served two purposes. It was an escape and it was a relief from the pain and made them feel something when they felt numb. And if you think about the blood slipping out, it's a very twisted, weird thing, I agree. But blood slipping out, it is kind of a release. And I don't mean to trigger anybody out there, don't get freaked out. But I'm just saying there's reasons why it's being done, but it's very similar to addiction. It's being done because I want relief from my pain. I'm looking for escape. So if you have that, I don't want you to feel at all weird or different, and I know a lot of people will cover their scars and feel completely ashamed. I think it's a big sign of recovery when I go to a convention or a new meeting and I see a lady there who just has her scars out without having to wear a long shirt and she doesn't give a fuck anymore. And I'm like, you have totally healed. You've accepted what the disease did to you and that you're well now, and that's not you. That's not who you are. But don't live in shame with it. Please reach out and get help. There's no reason to beat yourself up about that. Here's one of the most obvious ones. You knew I was going to bring it up, codependency issues. My ladies get so bent out of shape about fix, control, manage. He's not doing it the right way. This especially plays out with if they have a baby daddy and baby daddy's no longer in the picture because of divorce or he just ran, but still they're trying to micromanage that situation. And again, it's all distractions from them. It's all distractions from their recovery, their program, fixing yourself. And that's most of these things I am bringing up because I want you to be aware of. These are distractions. Like, don't look over here, look over here, and you won't get well when you're wasting your energy on these things. So we have a whole program, obviously, called Al-Anon, which you are welcome to go check out. There are books galore about codependency and Al-Anon program. I think it's bred in childhood as I experienced my codependency. And yes, men have terrible codependency as well. You'll get that next week. But it was my desperate attempt to find stability in chaos. If it was an environment where screaming is happening and things are being thrown and broken and there's just all this upheaval, then I could just sort of control and fix and manage this. And okay, it's very soothing. It's self-soothing. And I'm in the camp with a lot of therapists who believe that using is very ritualistic and that the process of cutting your dope, wrapping it into a joint, pouring your tall one, it's all ritual. Favorite glass, favorite whatever. And that's soothing. That's almost more soothing once you get going and the drug stopped working. That's even more soothing than the freaking drug itself. Once you get the high, you're like, well, this is kind of a letdown compared to the expectation. So again, not alone. Codependency is very, very common. And along with that, we also have to talk about abusive relationships. I was talking to one of my ladies in aftercare group today who was very brave to talk about her experiences and was saying that she just didn't know who she was. And she's learned in recovery that's not who she is, and she doesn't need that validation. But this is somebody who literally, their ex broke their neck. And they didn't even get any medical care for it. I mean, they went around with a broken neck for years without it being looked at. It's controlling, right? That real abuse. And this is somebody we're going to have on the podcast come fall. So stay tuned. I don't want to steal her thunder. I'm not going to even mention names, and she watches, so hello. But I think it's easy to sit outside of that and look at that and go, oh my God, why would you tolerate that, blah, blah, blah. And we did kind of talk to her about that. And she was like, I just didn't know. I didn't know myself. I didn't have any self-worth. And, I grew up in a family where they didn't give me any self-worth. So someone could come in and easily take advantage. And a lot of abusers are straight up predators. They know how to find the weak ones, groom them, so to speak. So again, nothing to be ashamed of, but both these two issues, codependency, abusive, but even all of them, the cutting, please feel free to find a safe place to talk about it. That's the beginning of all healing. I know it can be a source of shame, especially in this you go girl world where every woman's supposed to be uber strong, and indestructible, and I don't need a man. And then here you're going to come in and admit, well, I let a man control me for this many years. I can understand the shame and embarrassment of that. Just like men deal with sexual abuse. Little teaser for next week. But you've got to start talking. The talking about it opens up that Me Too effect where you begin to make it safe for another person to talk, and you find out, oh, you too? Oh, you too? And our ladies in town have this amazing retreat coming up in October, as they usually do it in the fall. And they do this thing called Stand Up for Your Sister, where they'll bring up a lot of these incidences and experiences of their childhood, and somebody will share it standing up, and those that have experienced the same thing will stand up to honor and support that person, saying that happened to me too. And maybe that's something we can do in our retreat.
Yeah, I've tried it.
Yeah.
It didn't translate to guys as well.
Men aren't going to stand up for their brother. Maybe we can alter it though and come up with some angle on it. But it's very powerful when you get to look around and see that I'm not alone. I'm definitely not the only one. And of course, as long as we're on this track, guys, I had to do the big three: codependency, abusive relationships, and sexual assault, sexual abuse. It's astounding how many of my patients and women in general have been abused and or raped sexually. And the statistics, which I'm not a locked in, this is the reality and full truth, but I think they're good guideposts. And the statistics say up to 85% of alcohol and drug abusers have been abused sexually, women. And up to 65% of men have been sexually abused. And you've got to start finding your support group first, finding your safe space with that one person, which we have a sponsor. And you can call it whatever you want, a guide, a teacher, but get your one safe person and then try with them to let out a few of your details. See if they are trustworthy. Don't have to accept that they're fully trustworthy. You just see what they do with it. Do they laugh at you? Do they make fun of you? Do they keep it secret? Do they honor your trust? And then you can share a little bit more. And suddenly you'll have another person say, but I want to talk. I want to talk. I heard the ladies had a very powerful group on Tuesday night, actually, reported back. And my patient was saying that she was stunned by the honesty. And that was very emotional. People were getting very emotional. I was like, yeah, that's a good group right there. Bring me to a group where tears are rolling. I freaking love it. I want emotions. I want real shit. So you can do that for each other. But there is a problem. As you know, there's always going to be one. Let me just jump ahead to it while I'm thinking about it. The number one comment I hear from more of my patients, and I realize addicted patients are a unique subgroup, but I've also seen this in other ladies. They don't like other women. I don't like them. I don't trust them. I don't talk to them. Blah, blah, blah. My friends are males. Blah, blah. I may go around them, but they're going to stab you in the back and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, damn. I hear it over and over, and I don't think I don't know. Sometimes I flirt with the idea that maybe it all came from mom. Maybe that mom, and we're going to get to that in a second. Maybe mom just kind of set them on a path where they're just like, yeah, no, I'm not going to trust them, these folks anymore. But, and I do know being addicted, people don't have scruples. They don't have boundaries. So they're going to step over you even without even thinking about it, because that's what happens in addiction land. But then trying to convince them that they can get a sponsor who's spiritually fit, who's not like that, and it can be a totally different experience. They just look at you like eyes glazed over, like, I ain't trusting them. I ain't telling them nothing. And that was something I had to personally go through when I had my issues with men because of my father, and I tell me to get a male sponsor, and I'm like, I've hung out with women my whole life. I deal with women. I talk to women. I like women. And they're like, no, you need a male. And I didn't know what that looked like. Never experienced it. And I did that little tool of trusting him with little tidbits and see what he did. And the biggest thing for me is him not judging me. He never judged me, no matter how fucked up things I shared with him. And that was a relief. So I'm tying that into the sexual abuse issue because I believe that women are stronger together on this issue. And that's what the Me Too movement proved, is when they united, they healed each other through their mutual suffering and mutual validation of each other, that you're supported and you're not weird and we accept you and you don't deserve to carry this anymore. So please support each other. Find a women's support group or start your own. You can get on our website and join us. If you're out of town of Louisville, Kentucky, go to the TSSR, 12stepspiritualrecovery.com website, and you can look up the Zoom number for Tuesday nights with the ladies. That's 12stepspiritualrecovery.com. Yeah, you got to write the whole thing out. Nothing else was available. We couldn't get TSSR. All right, just a couple more, and I want to bring my friend Dan in here and talk a little bit about his experiences. It's a common thread for both sexes. Now, this is in the literature. The research is big on this. They keep saying that if a male or female has major issues of conflict with the same-sex parent growing up, it's almost a certainty they're going to fall into some drug or alcohol abuse problems. Not necessarily saying they're going to be addicted, because we have to have that genetic piece in there too. But they're going to fall into using and have some difficulties with that. Now, I've seen that. This is how I explain to my patients why they need a same-sex sponsor unless they're gay. If you are heterosexual, you need a male to relate to, because males can only look at the world and have been through what other males have been through, and same things with ladies. My sister, I mentioned before, and she wouldn't mind me saying, she's in recovery. She's in Al-Anon, doing great. She has certain issues with my mother that she's done great to work through, but they're not the same issues I have. And sometimes when we're trying to communicate and sympathize, I mean, I can sympathize, but I don't really understand because I haven't walked in her shoes with that. But I have issues with my dad that she doesn't have. And every man does have issues with their dad. So I think it's true to a point that if you have problems with the same-sex parent, it's going to be a problem. And that I do hear a lot of difficulty and conflict. Some of my female patients aren't even talking to their own mother. There's been no communication for years. And I'm actually, to get them started, okay with that. I think that's a safe boundary for you just to be able to get sober first. And then we'll worry about trying to initiate contact. So that's nothing you have to rush. However, I find even more so that boys and girls having issues with their opposite sex parent seems to haunt them more into recovery. So you see what I'm saying here? We got the conflict at first with the same-sex parent that leads you to trouble with drug use, but then later on and through your later recovery, the one that lingers are the troubles with the opposite sex parent. So we're going to save the one for men next week, but for ladies, I don't want to call it for what it is. I'm just going to call it for what it is, daddy issues. A lot of them, and it may not be the stereotype that everybody thinks, but it's more or less this fractured distance, or they were the caregiver because their dad was a drunk and they were always cleaning them up and they were daddy's special girl, or they got sexually abused by their father. I know several people in family and stuff who have had issues, and that just fractured. And then how it plays out that I've seen with my patients is now they're chasing extremely unhealthy relationships where this person couldn't possibly bring them what they wanted from their father, but they're still thinking they can fix them or manage them to make them give them what they wanted from their father. And they don't leave the relationship. They stay in it and stay in it, and they get beat up, and they have disappointment after disappointment. And I'm like, why are you still with that person? It's just causing you to relapse. And they're like, still, but I love him. If I could had $1 for every time I've heard that phrase, but I love him. I know. But if it's not good for you, it's not good for you. So look at that. Look at that issues with same-sex parent and journal on that shit, but also don't neglect how is my issues with my opposite-sex parent still haunting me in my relationship choices today, in my serenity today. And because those are the ones I find really hanging on, especially next week when I talk from the male, because I have more perspective from the male perspective, a little bit more authority. I may have dressed up for the Rocky Horror Picture Show once or twice as a kid, but I can't fully speak for women. There's pictures too if you want to see them. No. Yeah, look into that because I think that's really productive for your therapy work going down the road. All right, last issue I wanted to touch on with this issue of women saying they don't like other women and have issues with them, etc. There's this unique dynamic that occurs in groups of women. I think it also occurs individually, but I can't put a projector inside their head to see what's going on. But within groups of women, you can hear them talking. And they tend to mercilessly pick apart other women that they see that are not in the group. And they start picking apart what they're wearing, what kind of shoes they got on, how their makeup's all whorish or whatever it is, and they got too much this showing, too much of that showing, and they're beating them. And that girl is way too big to be wearing that dress. Oh, yeah, you know it. And they start just picking them apart and pick. And I don't know if guys do as much of that. Well, bear with me. We'll talk about them next week. But it's weird because they can be supportive when they're together. But they tend to talk about that. They'll unite together in their bond by tearing some other female apart across the room at the club. Or, here's the other one, don't hate me, I'm just reporting. They unite over a man's bad behavior. And they pick that male apart and they whitewash all men that way. Oh, let me tell you, they're all that way, and blah, 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 blah. But they bond over it. They unite over it. But it's a negative. And I see this a lot, and I don't think it's healthy support. Like I said, healthy support is like you hear me, you're telling me your stories, we're all getting completely open and vulnerable, and we're safe. But if I'm in a group where you're picking apart them, my first thought is going to be, Dan, well, what are they saying about me when I leave? And they are. They'll say some shit they've been waiting to say all night about you. So we want to hear from you in the comments. If I'm stirring you up, hit me up. But I'm telling you, this is what I've seen. And it's real common. I mean, what do you think these reality shows are all about? Love Island and all this shit. It's all one bitch session after another bitch session. And he said what over me? He did what? Oh, I'm going to go over here and tell this person. And they go over and tell that person. And they're like, well, he said, I heard he said that. Well, he said that? Well, I'm going to go tell this person. And that's the whole show. And that's all. Because I channel surf. The other episode last night, this dude was finding out. She said, I said, what? I didn't say that. So you trying to go over there and talk to her, but she's all like doing this to him and shit like that. It's all drama and chaos and sex. And it's like, but that's what they're doing, and that's what we're holding up for our younger generation to see. So here's my question, ladies, and I'm going here. My mother was on the front row of women's liberation in the late 60s. She was right there. She Should I tell the story?
Why not?
They want to hear the fucking story. My mom was so bold that in her second marriage, when she found out my stepfather had penthouses hidden in his little man cave in the back, she decided one night, without us knowing, we come down, I'm maybe 12, my brother's 8, my sister's whatever, 16, whatever. We come down for dinner, and every picture from the magazines is taped all around the kitchen, on the refrigerator, on the stove, on the kitchen table. It's all covered. And she's like, well, if you're going to have these, we're going to have them out in the open. What are you hiding these for? And she was just throwing it in his face. He was mad. Ooh, was he fucking mad. But I'm like, that's the kind of lady I'm dealing with. Don't take no shit. And my grandmother was even fiercer. My grandmother was on the front lines of the women's suffrage movement, physically fighting for women to get the right to vote. So I know strong women. But when I'm running into, and again, subgroups, they are addicts, they are damaged people, but I don't know. I'm running into a lot of ladies that I still have to repeat to them over and over. This is 2025. You're telling me you're letting a man run your life, speak for you, tell you what you feel, what you're allowed to feel, where you're allowed to go, what you're allowed to wear? Yeah, a lot more prevalent than you think. And it's very subtle. But then when you suggest leaving them, or you need to get the fuck out of there, I don't know if I can do that. Now look, I get it. Sometimes it's a security issue because we have kids, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know where I can go, and I'm not sure I can support them on my own, and I get that. I don't want you to have to be a single mother. I'm not saying you have to leave the dude. But giving them control? I know somebody very close to me that I'm like, you need to do this step work. And you need to just tell your husband, you're coming to my house to do it. Fuck him. I didn't hear a word back. And I was like, well, I understand. But that's what I'm running into, folks. I'm the reporter, not the guy making this happen. I don't understand it because I thought we were all enlightened now. I thought this was the age of strong women. And you are always on these shows talking about we don't need a man and we are strong on our own. It's not what I see. So, food for thought. That's the only reason I bring it up. And the main reason I bring it up is it a distraction to your recovery? That you're still allowing this to get in the way of your better life? Because I find that my women in recovery that grow and really do this work of the 12 steps, they become some of the strongest ladies I know. And our good friend Cindy that was on the podcast recently, she was in aftercare group today, and I gave her a hella compliment when I told her, you are stronger, more secure in yourself, and happier than I've ever seen you in all the time I've known you. Would you agree with that, Dan?
Absolutely.
And it's astounding what a leap she's made recently. Like you could see the gradual thing, but then something happened to just turbocharge her and maybe even took it on that job in the prison. But she's just like, pfft, she's strong. And we want that. And I don't want to be with a weak woman. I mean, some guys do, but I don't. And don't think that that threatens men. It doesn't. I find it stimulating. I'm secure in myself. It doesn't threaten me. So stop hiding. Maybe that's my message. Just stop hiding. Be yourself. Be strong. Don't let a man control anything about you. But I know there's that still unequal finances and all that and the power struggle and all that. But if you guys bond together, you all can be stronger than you are. You do. I see this in recovery. I don't see it much anywhere else, especially when I'm watching the boob tube. And I realize that's dramatic. But again, I worry about the next generation watching that, and I guess that's what women do. The Bachelor, for God's sakes, these women killing each other over this stupid man. I mean, it's one freaking guy who's like dumber than dirt or doesn't have much of a personality or whatever. He's got looks though, and he's got the washboard stomach, and they're all just like stabbing each other and kitty catting each other, and I'm just like, oh my God, you're embarrassing yourself. All right, did I get you guys stirred up enough? Shall we bring Dan in here to see what he thinks about it? Is he brave enough to speak his truth? Again, this isn't my truth, so to speak. This is my observations as a therapist. So, Dan, any thoughts on this stimulating subject? Who doesn't like to talk about women?
Yeah, and it is, and I am a little, like you said, if I'm brave enough to speak my truth, I don't really know, because we have gotten in a position where, like, you've got some grounds to talk at some level because you've got this, frankly, you're a professional in the area of people. And it's not just because you're specialized in the addiction stuff. You've got a pretty well-rounded spot from your observations of people. You probably see as many people and deal with as many people, period, as anybody. So on my end, I'm a little, to like make observations, and I will just throw some other stuff, and it is funny. This stuff about this girl boss is the word I keep on hearing. You'd said something, this girl power kind of thing going on, and you'll see this stuff about, I don't need a man in my life, and then you'll see some of them, until it's time to cut the grass, or
change the oil.
Yeah, certain kinds of things, and I run around, I could probably do a little self-survey on my clientele in the handyman world, but the vast majority of the people I work for are women, by a long shot.
I've had a lot
by
of
a long
my
shot.
greatest spiritual teachers were all women, to be honest with you.
And it seems that most of them are, they're mostly single. I hardly ever do. I mean, now and again, I'm working for somebody who's actually got a partner's married or whatever, but most of the time not. And they're having to hire me to come to do the fixing and doing that kind of stuff. And many of them seem very secure. They don't seem. I don't run into a lot of that, but I do hear what you're saying, and I know there's a swath, right? There's a split someplace where you'd have both sides of the story, kind of like the black and white thinking thing.
Right.
The whole deal. The term they use is red pilled. I've been in the red pill rabbit hole for a little bit on the internet, and I really don't know why. I just find it entertaining and stimulating, and seeing how there's how people observe, like what you're talking about, and about how, like, all the women think they can get the top men, and they don't go for the not, so a lot of men are left out in the shade today, because most of the women think that they're going to shoot for the bachelor, the dude on TV, and there's just a lot of us running around that ain't that caliber in either looks, appearance.
So let's be
candid.
Let's be candid. There's a very viral, very successful sociologist who's written books, and he's all over the internet talking about these observations. And he talks about how women will say, "Well, what do you want in a man?" And they'll say, "I want somebody who's generous and kind and loving." And it's like, but that's not what they go for.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. If you go for what you're not saying you want, then you can't complain that you're not getting your needs met. And you actually have one area where you're a professional on that I have zero experience in. You were married for a long time.
Married. Yeah, yeah. And you talk about like what happens when you go into recovery and be able to see yourself and know, I can look back and see where I was a sissy husband. I was, and that's part of what probably broke it up. And I can see that where gals stop respecting you unless you can like hold a certain position of power in the family, and it's not overpowering. That's not what you're talking about.
Strength.
But that women need to feel secure in your strength and that kind of thing, and it's almost baked in. Just like I have to always say about men, we have to go out and bring home the bacon. I think very few men can get away with the stay-at-home dad role. We want to go out.
It's on our list. We're going to talk about in the next podcast, the provider role.
Right. So, I can take responsibility at some level for, that marriage breaking up. I can see where I fell short. I won't put myself completely on the hook there. It was take two to tango kind of thing. But I see that happen over and over again. I got a friend now that kind of did the same thing, and she lost respect for him, and when she didn't need him anymore financially, kick him to the curb. And that does seem to be the thing that's happening, is that women are growing financially like never before. They are earning more money and getting jobs, and they talk about like how many of them are in in corporate America now, and kind of bypassing, they're focusing on their careers at the time in the window when they really, that's their childbearing years, and then they get past that, and then they're in their 30s trying to have babies and are having trouble with that. And the flip side of that is many of them, in the old days, mom stayed at home, had to have a man to be going to work and paying for the kids' clothes and the food and keeping the lights on and all that stuff. That's just the way it worked forever. And it's changed. And now women can make their own money, and they'll do that thing where they don't need a man around. And I think we really got some big-time societal crashes coming from that same thing. If there's not some changes, they talking about us, that we actually are falling below the replacement rate for babies. in some areas. Now, that's not true across the board, but it's an interesting tipping point that I feel something is coming, and I certainly wouldn't begin to know the answer to that. I do know you was talking about, like, I also hear stuff, like when two guys get in an argument, we'll have it out with one another, right? Well, in that, or like gals, when they're not getting along, they pick apart each other's reputations and stuff like that, undermining stuff, and the whole social media thing, posting about people and doing this kind of stuff is an interesting thing about how these differences in between how two females will resolve a conflict and how two males will generally resolve a conflict. Those are interesting to me. And then, I've had a sponsee that didn't. I had a female sponsee that come to me with that same thing you said. She doesn't get along with women. Mm-hmm. But now that she's had a few years of recovery under her belt, she happens to still have a male sponsor at the moment. But I've seen her grow and become more of one of the women, and in one of those, is one of them strong women in the group you were talking about, and I've seen her fold herself into that. And it's like, it turns out, it's not that she doesn't, it's not that she doesn't like women. There's probably, like you said, something happened in her past that caused her some friction on that. And or who knows, you learn to, I know I learned at some point that I couldn't trust guy friends. That's not true, but I learned that at some point. And you get burned and you confide in somebody, and then they go tell everybody else, and you get laughed at. Well, I ain't telling them again, and it's just interesting. And a lot, when you read through those things, bells were going off in the areas of the women that I do know, going, yep. The whole cutting thing, you see it everywhere. If you look around, man, there's just women walking around every place that you can tell have been self-harming. Mm-hmm. And I can't wrap my arms around that. I can't wrap my head around it at all. Well, that's not exactly true. I used to not be able to wrap my head around it. I wrap my head around it better today, understanding the relief part of it and having some personal experience with it in my family too.
It's like people looking at us and not being able to comprehend why you're drinking a whole bottle of Jack Daniels. Can't you just have 1 or 2 drinks?
Yeah.
It's just, I need relief.
Yeah.
But I wanted to touch on what you were saying, because I don't think it's sissy at all. I think the rules are not spelled out for either sex nowadays, because the roles have changed, but we don't know what they are.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people are saying, I want both. And it's like, you can't realistically be both. How are you going to be strong and independent and still want a relationship? You got to give somewhere. And so if it's going to change in a relationship where, I think this ties into women's codependency, and you all have to forgive me, but now Dan and I are getting some real talk here. I have encountered a ton of women who are the victim of wanting to change their man. Mm-hmm. I'm going to fix him and mold him because he's not quite right. And I know if I just work on him a little bit, I can get him to be the way I want him to be. But the problem with that is if a man is too complicit and he doesn't put his foot down at some point, and it goes back to the dad thing. I think that's deep in our roots, that dad eventually puts his foot down and says, I'm the father, shut up. We're not doing that. But when a guy always says, okay, I'll go to the baby shower. Okay, I'll go to your friend's wedding. I say, God damn, I'm a man. I don't do that shit. I will do it once a while to support you, so pick your ones carefully. I will do that out of love for you. I don't want to do it. It's not what I do. I'm a man. I don't stand here and go, ooh, what a cute little baby. I couldn't give a fuck. Don't give him to me to hold, unless he's mine. But if she changes me and she gets her way, she will lose interest. The challenge is gone. She doesn't respect you anymore, like you said, and then she'll start looking elsewhere. Because of why? Because of this big primal thing we have in us that we've not been able to change. Now, society has changed, and we want to cancel people, and we want to say politically correct this and that. You can't change biology. We're talking hundreds and thousands of years of evolutionary conditioning. And so your brain is just wired a certain way, and men are wired to look at other women, even when you're married, because that's us looking for, let's keep the sex going because we need to procreate. Otherwise, we all die off the planet. The women are focused on family and gathering, and the men are the hunters. Not saying it can't change today, but it has changed. But again, once you change your man to the point where there's no longer anything challenging or interesting, then he's not going to be able to be the provider of security for you. If a man never puts his foot down, he's not going to be attractive. You are attracted because that's the difference. When I said women are saying they want one thing, but they're going for another. They're going for the tough guy. They're going for the guy who's cut like a washboard, and he's fucking got almost no feelings, but he doesn't really give me what I need, but he's so hot. He's so hot. Yeah, I'm not saying men don't do the same shit. We're talking about that one in the next one. But be careful about changing your man. Don't do that. Support him. Let him be who he is, and then give and take. That's relationship to me. It cannot be a game of one of us wins. And the biggest issue with that, do I go here? Yes, I do. This happy wife, happy life shit, sometimes that'll come up in group, and I'll challenge it. I ask them where that comes from. And if that's true, how come we don't have a saying for men? And I heard a comedian say it should be happy hubby, happy chubby. I mean, fair play, right? Give a little bit to you, give a little bit to me. How come it's all happy? Where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Well, I think it came from men, we'll talk about it next time, not uniting together. We don't unite in these groups that support each other. We do in recovery, right? Yeah, but where else does that happen? Yeah. We unite around a football game, and then we go home. We don't really share real shit.
Yeah. Yep, back into corporate America stuff, like when I'm talking about my friends and I'm running around, dudes don't understand that. Mm-hmm. They have nothing going on, but maybe a couple friends and their families, that's all they got going on. And some of them don't even have families. Some of them are just basically lone wolf kind of dudes, and they don't appear to be users or anything like that, but they don't have any men friends.
Well, that's a reflection of the rules changing, and people don't understand how to navigate this environment, because that is an epidemic of young men and women not having relationships. Yeah, there's not just incels; it's literally a lot of them just opting out. Yep. And that's a problem. Can we just establish one thing and talk real? We're different. Mm-hmm. And we have all these books that everybody buys. Men are from Venus, women are from Venus, men are from Mars, whatever the fuck it is. And we have all these Oprah shows that she has capitalized and made hundreds of billions of dollars talking about men and women and relationships and how we're different. We can't stop trying to change us to be the same. If you change somebody too much to be the same, you will no longer be interested in them. We're interested in you because you're different. Women are soft. Men are a little bit tougher. Women are like a little bit, and men are a little bit, that is the beauty of life and why we're still here and why we've been procreating. If you take all that away, because we're all supposed to be these bland, non-identified sex units, who knows what I am, I don't know. That's why I think people are confused. Would you agree?
I would. At some level, women are no longer women and men are no longer men.
What do you think your daughter would think about some of this? And I'm not trying to pull her out, and we don't have to mention names, and I'm not trying to throw her under the bus, but she's young. And so when I'm talking about these issues about cutting and food and all that shit, I mean, tick, 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 right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's particular. She's been struck with about everything on your list.
Which saddens me, because I'm an optimist, so I always hope that we're going to make progress. As a species, I'm like, we got to get through this. We got to survive. And it seems like we just keep doing the same dumb shit.
Yeah. Yep. In general, there's a piece of the human race that's doing it differently, that seems to be making progress. But in general, it looks like the majority is just like we say, you go to the store and it looks like you're walking among zombies. Mm-hmm. They're just, I'm sure that carries over into every piece of their life.
So takeaways from today, I would say, is, be who you are. That is vital in recovery. You don't have to be what the stock picture of a male, female, whatever that's supposed to be. And thank God for that. But once you know what you are and who you are, really embrace it and then share it with others, and then develop that support system so you guys can unite and support each other against the storms of all this confusion that's out there. Because a lot of these things I went over with women, I think, are coming out of isolation and no other tools. And so this is the only thing I'm doing for relief. I don't know what else to do. It's what I was programmed to do, and it gives me some relief. I love women. I love strong women. I want this women to all be Wonder Woman strong. This world to be that way, but I think we got a long way to go. Any last thoughts you had on the topic, Dan?
No, it's a good topic.
You think we navigated safely enough that we're not going to be put in bad boy jail?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think we said anything that's going to get us in trouble.
Just say that's going to get us flagged. They're going to trouble. What'd you say? What'd you say? What'd you say? Again, every week we talk about a different topic here, and we want to hear from you. So if you want to send us an email and rant or just give us some feedback, send it to iam12, the word recovery.com. That's iam12recovery at gmail.com. Sorry. One more time for the old man. iam12, the word recovery at gmail.com. So many words in a web address nowadays, it's hard to keep track. But again, we'd love to hear comments. Comment below. Leave us a like, subscribe, hate us, whatever you want to do. But we're here just to bring up different interesting topics to get you stimulated to think about. Journal on it, talk to your friends, take long walks and meditate on it, and come back with some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. All right, we do not have any questions this week, but we also take questions. So if you want to send us a question about anything having to do with your recovery or anything we talked about, bring it on and we will address it. And we don't even identify you. We promise you that. So I guess that's it for this week. Dan, if you want to join me in the serenity prayer, we'll wrap it up.
Absolutely.
All right, and the prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. You die if you don't. Woohoo! Come back and see us. We love you. Have a great life and a great week. Peace out.